Welcome to another episode of our video tutorial training. In this training, we will be covering the Delta level backup system, what it means for your backups, and how to manage the system and the overhead space it requires. It's important to understand the Delta level backup system because it's very good for your clients and it also requires some overhead space, and it's important to understand how to manage that. Instead of doing an incremental backup system where we simply identify files that have or have not changed and then overwrite the ones that have, we actually go a step further. We take the file that we currently have in our backup set and we're going to put it through our Delta engine to compare it against what we have in our reference system, which is in our cache folder. This comparison is called a Delta file backup, and we will get a bit level Delta file out of this comparison. This means that we're going to be saving time both in the local process of encrypting and compressing the file, as well as the bandwidth used to transfer the file off-site. It's also important to note that this system does require a local reference system. We call this our caching system, and we have a few options to manage our cache. Here in the software, we go to the Advanced tab and then go to Classic View. We can go to the Options tab here, and then go down to Caching Options, and we see three different options. The default option is the Acme Online Backup IntelliCache. This feature will put a threshold on the files that are copied into the caching system by saying files that are less than 500 kilobytes will not be stored in the cache system. Files that are greater than the 500 kilobyte limit set will be cached. This 500 kilobytes is a function of both machine health and bandwidth available. If you have a healthy machine but slow bandwidth, you will want to keep this threshold the same. If you have very fast machine and very fast bandwidth, then we can alter that threshold to increase it so that files are not cached if they do not meet certain size requirements. Now, what this function does is say that if a file is this small, it's no faster to do a Delta level backup than it is to do a straight incremental backup. The second option we have here is use binary compression. This will cache every file that's in your backup set to the cache folder. This means that the backups will be very fast as we'll be doing a Delta level backup for each of them. One of the few reasons you would want to do this is that it actually does create a raw reference file, and we can see that in the cache folder we have here. The cache is located in the C drive, Program Files, and then the program file directory for the backup program. Here it's Acme Online Backup. We go into the cache and I mouse over and I can see that this cache is nearly 6 gigs in size. That sounds about right because my backup set here is about 6.5 gigs. If I open up the cache, you'll see that I have multiple files. These files are cached so that they can run comparisons against what's currently in hand. So if any of those items were to change, we would see a Delta level backup go into those. Back to the software. So if you dedicate an entire drive, say an external USB drive, a slave drive, of course we recommend having an eSATA connection because that would be faster. You could use binary compression so that you have a raw offline version of every file in your backup set as it's currently represented on the server. If you've noticed, our system does require authentication through the server, which means that even our local backup program is not an offline backup program. Our system does require internet access even for the local backup. This is part of security. The third option is retransfer the entire file. This means that we're going to be doing an incremental backup rather than a Delta level backup. This would be used in the case that your backup set is static. Say you have a doctor's office with many x-rays. Those x-rays are not going to be changing, they're going to be newly added. A lot of engineering firms have CAD files and naming conventions so that each new revision of a CAD project gets saved with a new file name indicating that revision. This means that those files will not be considered a changed version of a file, but a newly added file in its entirety. Again, our system does recognize unique files by complete file path beginning with the machine name and ending with the file name and extension. Any deviation, and this system will recognize that file as a completely new file. In many server environments, overhead space needs like these will not be available by default, and we'll have to relocate both the cache folder and possibly the temporary folder. If we go back into our program file directory and we go down to our storage executable file and go to storage.exe config. Now we'll see that the storage.exe is actually for the UI, where the upload agent is for the backup that actually runs. So I open up the configuration file and I do a search for cache. The first option that comes up is cache path value equals sign with parentheses here. Here I can enter another destination for the cache folder. Notice here it has some instructions to show that it must end with a backslash. Please do note that this is just a configuration file and will not create this folder. This folder is something that must be created in Windows Explorer. You also have above it temp path with the same option to change the location, and packages path with the same option to change the location. Remember that when we are changing the location, the connection to this destination is important for the speed of the backup, because we will be transferring data back and forth between these two spots. Another option that we have in this configuration file for the cache, if we search down to the bottom, is to set the IntelliCache threshold to a different value other than the default 500 kilobytes. You notice here it says SOS UA for upload agent, IntelliCache threshold in KB. So again, we're going to want to change this only in the case that we have a very fast machine and a very fast internet connection, because the Delta level backup does save time in both instances. If your machine is spiking in virtual memory constantly, you may want to keep this threshold the same. If your internet access is not so fast, say less than 300 kilobits per second, you may want to leave this as well. This is only something you want to change if you have a backup set where you can identify a clear line between changing files and non-changing files. For instance, a law firm with many archived PDFs of closed cases may not have any need for the Delta level backup at all, or maybe not have a need for the Delta level backup below 1 meg. So let's just say these PDF cases are 1 meg exactly. We could set this to say if it's not at least 1025, then it's not going to be cached. And that is it for the cache system.